Most betrayals don't arrive screaming, they arrive smiling, wearing polished shoes, calling you dad, sitting at your kitchen table drinking your coffee like they belong there. And the dangerous part? Sometimes they belong there for years before you realize what they really are. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 64 years old, retired from the Raleigh paper mill after 27 years supervising overnight crews most people were smart enough to avoid. I live in a quiet neighborhood in North Carolina where the oak trees are, older than the houses, and everybody recognizes each other's cars by sound alone. The kind of place where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. But 3 weeks ago, my son called me at 12:04 in the morning and told me to hide inside my own attic. And before that night was over, I learned my son-in-law had spent nearly a decade destroying my family from the inside. The call came on a Thursday, cold November rain tapping against the windows. The house dark except for the little lamp beside my recliner downstairs. I'd fallen asleep watching an old western with the volume too low. Ever since my wife Helen died 2 years earlier, sleep came in pieces instead of full nights. You stop sleeping deeply after enough loss. My phone buzzed beside the bed. Noah, my oldest son. Immediately something felt wrong. Noah never called late. He texted, scheduled things, planned everything. Even as a child, he behaved like a 40-year-old accountant trapped in a teenager's body. So when I answered and heard his voice, my stomach tightened instantly. "Dad," he said quietly, "I need you to listen carefully and not interrupt me." I sat upright. "What happened?" "Turn off every light in the house." A pause. "Then go upstairs to the attic and lock the door behind you." For a second, I honestly thought someone had died. "Noah, please," he interrupted sharply. "Just do it first." Then his voice lowered. "And don't tell Eric I called." The room went completely still. Eric Dalton, my son-in-law, my daughter Claire's husband of 9 years, the same man currently sleeping in my guest bedroom downstairs after telling us renovations were happening at their condo in Charlotte. I had spent the last 4 nights feeding that man homemade chili and listening to him complain about contractors. Now my son was telling me to hide from him. Fear works strangely when you get older. Young people panic loudly. Older people go quiet. I moved through the dark house, shutting off lights one by one. Kitchen, hallway, living room. The grandfather clock near the stairs ticked loud enough to sound threatening. Every floorboard suddenly felt dangerous beneath my feet. But I climbed the pull-down attic ladder slowly and locked the door behind me. The attic smelled like cedar wood and dust, old Christmas decorations, storage bins, boxes filled with pieces of Helen's life I still couldn't bring myself to throw away. I sat beside an old trunk labeled winter clothes and tried to slow my breathing. Then I noticed something strange, a narrow crack between 2 warped floorboards near the far wall, and directly below it, the guest bedroom. At first, nothing happened. Then, nearly 15 minutes later, the bedroom light clicked on. Eric walked into the room wearing gray slacks and a white undershirt. He looked calm. Too calm. Not like a man sneaking around, like a man following a routine. That scared me more. I watched him move toward the corner of the room where Helen's old antique chair sat beside the wall. He grabbed the chair and slid it aside without hesitation, like he'd done it before. Then he crouched near the baseboard and pressed his fingers against the wall. A hidden panel lifted open. My blood turned cold. Behind it was a safe. I have lived in that house for 26 years. I built the back deck myself, installed the kitchen cabinets, repaired the upstairs bathroom 3 separate times because Helen refused to hire plumbers, and I had never seen that safe before in my life. Eric opened it in less than 20 seconds. Inside was a thick folder. He sat on the bed and began flipping through documents carefully. Then he started taking photographs, slowly, methodically, like someone preserving evidence. I leaned closer toward the crack in the floorboards. One page turned just enough for me to read the heading, Last Will and Testament, and underneath it, Helen Brennan. For one horrible second, my brain stopped working. Helen already had a will. We created it together years ago after her second cancer surgery. I remembered sitting beside her in the lawyer's office, holding her hand while she joked about how unfair it was that dying required so much paperwork. The estate had already been settled. Everything divided fairly between me, Noah, and Claire. So what was Eric doing with another copy hidden inside my house? Then something else hit me. Noah had known. That's why he called. That's why he sounded terrified. I stayed in that attic nearly 4 hours, listening, watching, trying to understand how my family had somehow become strangers overnight. By dawn, my knees hurt so badly I could barely stand. My phone buzzed again. A text from Noah. Come outside. Alone. I slipped quietly through the side door and crossed the yard wearing house slippers and an old flannel jacket. A dark SUV waited 2 houses down. Noah sat behind the wheel looking exhausted, not tired, destroyed. He looked older than 38, like stress had carved years directly into his face. The second I got inside the vehicle, I looked at him and said, "You better start talking." He nodded slowly. Then, for the next 40 minutes, my son dismantled everything I thought I knew about my family. It started 8 years earlier, back when Noah had been arrested for federal wire fraud. At the time, the entire situation felt wrong. The investigation happened too quickly. Evidence appeared too neatly. Witnesses surfaced from nowhere, but Noah refused to explain much. Even after serving 21 months in prison, he stayed quiet. I assumed shame changed him. I was wrong. It wasn't shame. It was obsession. According to Noah, the fraud case had been fabricated. Carefully, deliberately. And the person behind it was Eric. I stared at my son in disbelief. That's impossible. I wish it was. Then Noah opened a thick file folder. Inside were bank records, emails, phone logs, financial transfers, years of evidence. Slowly, the story unfolded. Eric had manipulated a former brokerage employee into creating fake transaction records tied to Noah's accounts. Anonymous reports were filed. Federal investigators got involved. Noah became the perfect target. But why? The answer nearly made me sick. Helen's inheritance. Noah pulled out another document. The original version of Helen's will, not the altered version processed after her death. The real one. Equal shares between me, Noah, and Claire. Noah explained everything quietly. Somewhere before Helen died, Eric paid someone connected to the law office handling the estate. The original documents disappeared. The revised version reduced Noah's inheritance almost completely, and because Noah was under federal investigation at the time, nobody questioned it. My hands started shaking. You're telling me Claire married a man who framed her brother? Noah looked out the windshield silently. Finally, he said, he planned it before proposing to her. That sentence broke something inside me, because suddenly every holiday memory became poised. Every Christmas, every birthday, every handshake, all fake. I remembered the night Eric asked permission to marry my daughter. He stood in my backyard smiling politely while promising to protect her. The entire time, he was already planning how to destroy her brother. I pressed both hands against my face. How long have you known? Pieces of it. Years. And the rest, enough to prove it? 6 months. I stared at him. You investigated this yourself? Noah nodded once, then quietly added, I joined federal investigations because I wanted access to the people who buried me. I honestly didn't know whether to feel proud or horrified. Maybe both. What happens now? I asked. Noah looked at me carefully. Then he reached into the folder and handed me an invitation. Claire and Eric Dalton, 9th anniversary dinner. Saturday evening. Tomorrow night. We let him relax, Noah said calmly. Then we ended. The next evening felt surreal. Eric walked through my kitchen smiling like nothing had changed, drinking coffee, checking his phone, asking if I was excited for dinner. I kept wondering how many lies a person could tell before forgetting who they really were. That restaurant downtown looked exactly like the kind of place Eric loved. Expensive, elegant, crowded with people who enjoyed looking successful. Claire had reserved a long table near the back. Candles, wine glasses, flowers. She looked beautiful when she arrived. Too happy. That was the hardest part. Watching my daughter laugh beside a man who had built their entire marriage on manipulation. Dinner started normally. Stories, wine, business talk. Eric controlled conversations the way skilled men control rooms, smoothly, confidently. Then the restaurant doors opened, and Noah walked in. Behind him were 2 federal agents. Everything changed instantly. Claire smiled at first, then she noticed the agents. Then she saw Noah's expression. Eric turned slowly in his chair, and for the first time in 9 years, I saw fear on his face, real fear. Noah stopped beside the table. "Eric Dalton," he said calmly, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and tampering with legal documents." Silence exploded across the room. People nearby stopped eating. Waiters froze. Claire stared in confusion. Eric tried recovering quickly. "What is this?" Noah didn't blink. "We recovered the original will." Eric went pale. "We also recovered financial transfers connected to the fabricated fraud investigation against me." Still silence. Then Noah delivered the final blow. "And we have photographs from the hidden safe inside my father's house." That ended him. Completely. I watched something collapse behind Eric's eyes. Not innocence. Performance. The agent stepped forward with handcuffs. Claire finally whispered, "No, just one word." But it sounded like heartbreak physically tearing apart. Eric looked toward me then, like he wanted sympathy or understanding. I gave him neither, because I kept remembering my son sitting alone in prison while this man attended family dinners pretending to care. The handcuffs clicked shut, and suddenly the performance was over. After they led Eric away, nobody moved for several seconds. Then Claire looked at Noah. "How long?" "Too long," he answered softly. She started crying quietly, not dramatic, just devastated. I moved beside her and wrapped my arms around her shoulders. And despite everything, despite the betrayal, the lies, the destruction, she still leaned into me like the little girl afraid of thunderstorms. 3 weeks later, the courts officially restored Helen's original will. Noah's name returned where it belonged. Claire filed for divorce. And me? I still wake up some nights hearing floorboards creak downstairs, still thinking about hidden safes, hidden lies, hidden people. But one thing changed. For the first time in years, my family stopped living inside deception. And sometimes that's what justice really is. Not revenge, not punishment. Just finally seeing the truth clearly. After years of darkness,